Jesse Waters. Interrupt again and again. But Jasmine's 10th reply turns the whole debate around. Jesse Waters built his brand by never losing control. Not of the narrative, not of his guests, and definitely not of Fox News primetime. Every evening, millions of viewers tune in to watch him deploy his perfected techniques, rapid-fire interruptions, well-timed gotchas, and that signature smirk that signals he's about to steamroll another opponent. But on this night, everything was about to change. He'd invited Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a freshman Democrat from Texas, young, a woman of color, and by every calculation, a tailor-made target for one of his legendary on-air ambushes. What Waters didn't realize was that this time, he wasn't the only one who'd done his homework. From the moment Crockett took her seat across from him, the stage was set for a showdown. The spotlights bounced off her sharp blazer and even sharper eyes, her demeanor calm but unmistakably poised for battle. This was not just another politician eager for a few seconds on cable news. Crockett was a trained civil rights attorney, battle-tested in courtrooms against adversaries far more aggressive than any cable news anchor. She had watched Waters' greatest hits, mapped every interruption and every trap, and arrived not just to participate, but to turn the tables. The tension in the studio was electric. Waters launched his attack before Crockett could finish her first thought, cutting her off in classic fashion. Then again, and again. 9 times in 3 minutes, he cut, steered, and redirected, working harder than ever to prevent a coherent answer from reaching viewers' ears. Every interruption was a move straight from the Fox News playbook. Loaded phrases, focus-grouped outrage triggers, and control room signals telling him exactly when to strike. For his audience, it was familiar territory, until it wasn't. What neither Waters nor his producers could see was that Crockett was counting. She was cataloging each interruption, holding her ground with the patience of a seasoned prosecutor watching a witness hang themselves by their own words. The control room cheered each disruption, thinking Crockett would suffer the same fate as so many guests before her, flustered, defensive, maybe even angry enough to fulfill every stereotype the show was built on. Instead, something remarkable happened. On her 10th attempt, she flipped the script. Crockett turned away from Waters and addressed the camera directly. Her tone was firm, but not emotional. Her presence, unshakable. She thanked Waters for his interruptions, not out of sarcasm, but to make a point that would ricochet from the studio to every viewer at home. In 3 minutes, she explained, she hadn't been allowed to finish a single answer. 9 times the platform meant for her voice had been used to silence her. And that, she declared, was exactly how voter suppression works, not always through dramatic spectacle, but through 1,000 small tactics that ensure certain voices are never fully heard. Waters was left momentarily speechless, a rarity in his career. Behind the glass, the control room froze, realizing too late that the ambush had become a masterclass in role reversal. Social media caught fire, hashtags popped, memes rolled out, and the Crockett method was born before the next commercial break. It wasn't just a TV segment anymore. It was an instant parable about power, control, and how the game can change when someone refuses to play by the old rules. This wasn't another clip destined to fade by morning. It was the template for how silence can be weaponized and how, with perfect timing, it can also be shattered. In that one moment, Crockett didn't just survive the ambush, she transformed it, offering anyone who's ever been talked over, sidelined, or dismissed a brand new blueprint for fighting back. And as the internet would soon prove, sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one who patiently waits for you to expose yourself, then thanks you for it. Every televised clash is ultimately a contest of personalities, but when Jesse Waters and Jasmine Crockett sat across from each other on Fox News primetime, it was a collision of 2 very different brands of power. Waters came in as the undisputed master of the format, a host who'd built his reputation and his ratings on the ability to bulldoze politicians before they ever got up to speed. His maneuvers were well rehearsed. He'd spend hours dissecting partisan talking points, plotting interruption triggers, and rehearsing his steamroller technique. His game was all about timing. Interrupt at the moment of vulnerability, recite loaded phrases like radical or cheating the system, then pivot to a smirking monologue while his guest floundered for airtime. Behind the scenes, Waters' team had the formula down to a science. A squad of researchers tracked every potential guest, building playbooks of past stumbles, family controversies, and preferred sound bites for maximum disruption. In the control room, producers flashed subtle hand signals whenever it was time for the next interruption, ensuring every conversation would play out as a performance rather than a real exchange. Waters' position in the conservative media ecosystem depended on this dominance. His audience, fiercely loyal and primed for confrontations, anticipated nothing less than the spectacle of a liberal, especially a young or minority guest, being cut down live on air. But Jasmine Crockett was nothing like the usual targets. At 43, she had climbed into Congress not by riding a political wave, but by grinding through the trenches as a civil rights attorney. She doggedly defended those nobody else would, from hostile courtrooms in Texas to heated policy fights in D.C. Years in law had taught her that power isn't in who speaks loudest, but in who controls the moment when tempers flare. For Crockett, this wasn't just politics, it was a test of narrative and nerves. So when Waters' team flagged her as an easy mark, they missed two facts. She studied harder than her hosts, and she'd spent a lifetime learning how to win even when the deck was stacked against her. Crockett arrived as a paradox, calm, professional, and measured in voice, but with eyes betraying zero fear. Instead of hoping to get her message out, she came armed with counter-strategy, already anticipating the classic traps. She'd watched Waters' program, marking every spot where he cut off a guest or changed topic. Her approach was deliberate. Don't rush, don't get flustered, let the repetition build. The lesson of courtroom warfare is patience. Wait for your opponent to overplay their hand, then make the whole case in your closing argument. This setup made for a fascinating chess match from the very first question. Waters kept pressing the attack, framing every inquiry to corner her into defensive talking points, using control of the microphone as both weapon and shield. While he appeared to dominate, it was Crockett who was quietly gaining the upper hand. Each time he bulldozed through her answer, she noted it, counting, tallying, and letting the audience at home feel the mounting unfairness. The real twist was that both knew how power functioned in that room. For Waters, interruption was performance, an act for viewers, proof he could cut down the other side and define the pace of the conversation. For Crockett, enduring it became part of a closing argument she knew she'd get to make. By the time she was interrupted for the 9th time, a different dynamic was visible. The bully was so intent on winning the moment that he didn't see the long game unfolding across from him. This was no ordinary guest versus host segment. It was a study in power. How it's wielded, how it can be exposed, and how, when patience meets preparation, even the best scripts can come undone. As the segment edged toward its fateful climax, anyone watching carefully could see Crockett wasn't losing control, she was setting the stage to seize it in the most unforgettable fashion. Every guest comes on Fox News knowing there will be a fight. But what unfolded between Jesse Waters and Jasmine Crockett was barely an interview at all. It was a live demonstration of power, disruption, and what happens when television turns into something closer to a one-sided court. From the start, it was clear Waters had no intention of letting a real exchange of ideas happen. The so-called debate was choreographed interruption, seasoned with loaded language and engineered outrage, playing out in real time for viewers accustomed to seeing liberal guests squirm. It began the very first moment Crockett tried to answer. She spoke 3 words before Waters lunged in. "But Congresswoman," he snapped, drowning out her intro to reframe the setup. Again, as she switched tactics, trying shorter sentences, distilling her point into bursts, he maneuvered his cues, deploying the signature Fox arsenal, radical voting bill, making it easier to cheat, eliminating basic security. Each phrase was a landmine, calculated, not to solicit an answer, but to force Crockett onto defensive ground, to make her look evasive or extreme before she could even present her position. Between every truncation, the studio's control room hummed a silent war. Producers, practiced at this routine, offered hand signals and eye contact for when to pounce. The goal wasn't clarity, it was chaos. Drown the substance, chase the gotcha. Viewers felt it. Every time Crockett started to build a case, she'd be boxed in, her words clipped and overrun. This was the art of the interruption tally, 9 in total by the 3-minute mark each time, the discussion swinging further from journalism and deeper into spectacle. Crockett didn't shout or plead. Instead, she shifted gears. Years in the courtroom had primed her for periods when an opponent scripts the rules only to hang themselves with them. She knew when not to force a break in the proceedings, how to let the mounting unfairness become visible to anyone paying attention. Her tone remained even, her language precise. But inside, the case was being built in the viewer's eyes, not at the host's desk. On each attempt, Crockett tried new angles. She attempted to talk about the nuts and bolts of the proposed federal voting bill. Security provisions, nonpartisan oversight, reporting standards. But no sentence was finished. Waters, trained by years under Bill O'Reilly, fired back with, "But isn't that letting Washington bureaucrats dictate?" As if every attempt at explaining the bill was subterfuge. Even the word standard was interrupted, turning bipartisan reforms into evidence of federal overreach. Waters was playing to his base. Every pause, every talking over, was a signal to the audience that he could control the progressive narrative without ever letting it breathe. His producers cheered these moments. Social media accounts were likely prepped to post viral clips of Crockett failing to answer. Most guests at this point would falter, rush, stammer, or lose their cool. Crockett instead maintained her poise, letting her silence between interruptions become a message. The louder the host, the more obvious the bias. By the ninth interruption, Crockett's entire posture had shifted. Gone was the politician seeking a fair shake. In her place was the trial lawyer, quietly noting every broken rule of decorum. The game that Waters believed he was winning had, without his notice, already shifted. The audience, spellbound by the drama, could see the setup for what it was. Not a clash of ideas, but a textbook case of silencing, of how control is exercised when the spotlight's on, and how quickly it can unravel when someone refuses to play along. As the interview limped toward its breaking point, viewers at home began counting the interruptions. Hashtags started to trend with every incomplete sentence, every rebuttal stifled before it began. The studio might have thought they had staged another rout, but the interview that wasn't had just set up the reversal that no one, least of all Waters, saw coming. And what happened next would turn everything upside down. For 3 relentless minutes, Jesse Waters played his usual game: interrupt, derail, reframe. But with each cutoff, a new undercurrent gained strength. By his 9th interruption, it was no longer just about voter ID or federal standards. It was about power and who wields it in the media arena. Jasmine Crockett, who'd let 9 opportunities be snatched away, recognized that the moment to drop her advantage had finally arrived. If her patience was the rope, Waters had just tied the knot himself. On the 10th attempt, his voice rising, eyes gleaming mischievously, Waters expected another flustered or defensive retreat. Instead, Crockett leaned back, her posture shifting from poised guest to lead prosecutor. She didn't respond to Waters' bait. Instead, she paused and with a faint, knowing smile faced the camera. Behind the glass, the control room sensed a breach in their formula, but there was no time to react. "You know what, Jesse?" Crockett began, her tone strikingly calm. "I want to thank you." For a split second, confusion flickered across Waters' face. His notes, his usual tactics, none had prepared him for a guest genuinely expressing gratitude. "Thank me?" he tried, already off script. Unfazed, Crockett continued, her words laced with the cool precision of a seasoned litigator. "Yes, you've just shown your audience, in real time, what I mean when I talk about suppression and about power." Waters instinctively moved to interrupt, but Crockett's hand, palm raised with courtroom authority, stopped him cold. "For the last 3 minutes, you've interrupted me 9 times. Not once have I finished a thought. Not once have your viewers heard an answer in full. You've used your position to silence me. Live in front of the very people you say need to hear this debate. And that, Jesse, is exactly the point." The studio atmosphere thickened. Camera operators froze, caught between Waters' rare speechlessness and Crockett's commanding presence. The audience at home, used to seeing liberal guests flustered or angry by this point, watched as Crockett didn't raise her voice or plead for airtime. She simply took it. "What are you doing now?" It's the same tactic being used across the country. Legislators claim to care about election integrity, but their real strategy is to keep certain voices from finishing a sentence on TV or in a voting booth. She locked eyes with the camera, turning her message from the host to the nation. Suppression isn't always closing polling places or passing new laws. Sometimes it's as simple as never letting someone finish speaking. "Tonight, you've made my case for me. Better than any statistic ever could. As her words landed, the shock was visible, not just in Waters, but in the control room's silence and the chat feeds exploding online. Social media erupted. #LetHerSpeak, #Crockett10, and #JessieOwned trending before the segment cut to commercial. Waters tried to regain control, but now the balance had flipped. Every attempted interruption was visibly forced. His confidence wobbled by Crockett's unblinking composure and her crystal-clear analogy. The host who claims to care about democracy caught silencing a democratically elected voice in real time. This was the defining pivot. Crockett had turned the interview and the entire national conversation inside out. The battle wasn't over policy anymore. It was about respect, fairness, and who actually gets to speak. Her legal mind had seen through the performance, called out its mechanics, and left viewers questioning the machinery behind every debate they'd ever watched. It was a viral masterclass not in shouting, but in waiting, then delivering a message so irrefutable even Waters had no comeback. By the time cameras faded, the tables had turned for good. Crockett wasn't content to just answer a question. She'd answered the whole premise of the show, and in one stunning, strategic breath, she'd proved that when the usual rules are built to silence, the only way to win is to change the rules for everyone watching. The moment Jasmine Crockett flipped the tables on Jessie Waters didn't just rattle the studio, it detonated across the internet at the speed of social outrage. In those few seconds of calmly delivered clarity, she hadn't only won an argument, she'd revealed the playbook. And the audience, both at home and in the control room, immediately understood that something had just changed. While Waters sat frozen, his trademark smirk fading to disbelief, Crockett's connecting of media interruption to the deeper issue of suppression reverberated far beyond cable news. Inside Fox News, chaos reigned. Producers scrambled to decide whether to cut to commercial, desperate to pull back control as the segment slipped through their fingers. Unbeknownst to them, clips of Crockett's takedown were already off the air and into the wild. Viewers who'd grown numb to the spectacle of the beaten liberal guest were suddenly electrified, watching a calm challenge to the system they'd been watching for years. Snapchat, TikTok, and Twitter filled with real-time reaction videos. Some viewers counted the interruptions aloud, while others stitched the moment into broader stories of being silenced themselves. Within 15 minutes, Let Her Speak and #Crockett destroys. Waters were trending #1, and the interview was already being dissected on political Reddit threads and Instagram reels. Memes came next. Screenshots showed Waters caught mid-blink as Crockett delivered her "thank you" line, while Twitter users overlaid graphics. "This is what suppression looks like." TikToks reenacted the moment with users lip-syncing Crockett's calm retort side by side with captions tallying every time Waters had cut her off. Activists seized on the metaphor, using the clip to explain the mechanics of real-world suppression, how power doesn't always shout, but sometimes just refuses to listen. Reddit users created bingo cards for media interviews, each interruption a square, each failed rebuttal a win for the audience, until Crockett's reversal allowed everyone watching to mark their whole card. News sites, sensing a viral groundswell, pulled the segment for immediate analysis. Editorials varied. Some praised the Crockett method for teaching a new generation how to handle bullies in power, while others criticized Waters' tactics, finally acknowledging, on both sides of the aisle, what so many viewers already felt. The real story wasn't just about voter ID or federal standards, but about who gets the microphone and who gets to finish their story. The metaphor spread further than even Crockett could have imagined. Students clipped the segment for classroom discussion, with teachers explaining how a simple refusal to be silenced can change the rules, even when the whole setup is against you. On LinkedIn and workplace forums, leaders referenced the moment as a masterclass in managing meeting interruptions and office politics. Civil rights groups posted the video with new hashtags, #VoiceMatters, #EndSuppression, and #SpeakUntilHeard. Women's organizations cited Crockett's response as the perfect way to redirect power dynamics in male-dominated spaces. At Fox, the fallout was immediate. Inside sources reported advertisers, even some long considered untouchable, placing calls about the optics of silencing an elected official of color. Other cable networks aired their own versions of the segment, inviting communication experts, trial lawyers, and activists to break down why Crockett's metaphor landed so hard. But most importantly, ordinary viewers were talking at dinner tables, on campus quads, in group chats about how the show's real message was bigger than any bill or policy point. It was about every moment when someone in power uses systems, rules, time limits, interruptions to make sure certain voices don't get heard. Crockett's move didn't just win her an argument, it changed the conversation, turning years of interruption into a national metaphor about what Sapribayigis Sion really looks like. And as the numbers ticked upward, Crockett's composure became more than just a news cycle win. It became the blueprint for 1,000 mini-rebellions, broadcast, believed, and imitated wherever a loud voice once thought they'd always have the last word. Barely had the Crockett Waters clip finished its first viral loop before the real-world consequences barreled in, fast, sharp, and inescapable for Fox News and everyone orbiting the moment. Behind closed doors, alarm bells sounded on 6th Avenue. Executives watched, first in disbelief and then in growing panic, as the usual applause for Waters' pugnacious style turned to widespread criticism. The control and dominance Fox cultivated had, in one 3-minute interview, become national shorthand for silencing, not debate. Advertisers were the first to react. Within hours, prominent brands began quietly contacting their media buyers, asking exactly how many times their logos had appeared on screen during the meltdown. Some pulled ads for the next broadcast cycle. Others demanded assurance that similar situations wouldn't repeat. The domino effect rattled through the halls. Being seen as sponsors for a segment now seen as textbook bullying just wasn't worth the controversy. Internal memos revealed Fox's PR crisis team was assembling talking points, anticipating negative headlines and booking failures. And fail they did, at least when it came to future guests. Democratic strategists, once hesitant but occasionally game for a chance to reach new viewers, started refusing outright. Others cited the Crockett precedent. Why walk into a room where interruption, not inquiry, was the format? Waters' show, once a power magnet for fiery exchanges, faced a booking drought. Credible lawmakers and commentators were declining at rates not seen since the show's inception. The staff scrambled, sometimes relying on less persuasive surrogates or diluting the brand with friendlier interviews, losing the edge that once made primetime must-watch TV. Ratings next took a hit. Overnight viewership for Waters' slot slumped as frustrated progressives, energized by Crockett's takedown, mobilized campaigns to highlight the unfairness of the format and urge boycotts. Even core viewers, those who tuned in for predictable, liberal embarrassment, found themselves captivated by the segment for all the wrong reasons, some admitting online that dominance had given way to discomfort. Data leaked weeks later showed key demographic drops, especially among younger and more diverse viewers. But the institutional fallout didn't stop at Fox's doors. Crockett's sudden rise was meteoric. Media training organizations, never slow to seize a teachable moment, spliced the clip into how not to be bullied sessions for politicians, activists, and workplace leaders. Universities and law schools assigned the interview in communications and advocacy courses, dissecting Crockett's calm under pressure as a model, not just for media, but for boardrooms and governments. The Crockett method became shorthand for using the oppressor's tactics against them, creating leverage from patience and impeccable timing. Political science curricula adapted, with professors launching entire modules dedicated to modern media manipulation. How do interruption and narrative control silence democracy, and how can opponents reframe the agenda? Harvard, Georgetown, NYU, any school with a class on political communication or gender and race in media added the Waters-Crockett exchange as a required viewing. Discussion groups formed around the question, when does assertiveness cross into silencing, and how do institutional incentives reinforce that line? Meanwhile, internal pressure at Fox ballooned. Staffers grumbled about now frequent legal and PR briefings, warnings to moderate tone or risk further boycotts. Anonymous producers worried aloud. Had the old-school steam, rolling, finally gone out of vogue? Was a new era of visible, viral accountability here to stay? All the while, Crockett rode the groundswell. Fundraising exploded. small-dollar donors citing the clip. Requests for media appearances spiked, and organizations from the Congressional Black Caucus to nonpartisan leadership institutes lauded her performance. The power dynamic had flipped. What was intended as a segment to embarrass a young lawmaker became a blueprint for flipping the script in hostile territory. The real lesson of the institutional fallout was this. In a world where every move is clipped, shared, and debated in real time, the old tools of control, interruption, dominance, spectacle, no longer guarantee victory. Sometimes they become evidence. And in the aftermath, the institutions themselves are forced to rethink not just who they book, but what kind of power really wins in the age of receipts, reaction, and relentless review. The ripple effect of Jasmine Crockett's masterclass on Jesse Watters' show quickly outgrew the realm of cable news controversy, morphing into a broader movement that stretched far past the walls of Fox News. What began as a viral metaphor for silencing on live TV became an instant touchstone for anyone who'd ever struggled to be heard. In politics, yes, but also at work, in classrooms, and across everyday relationships. Crockett's phraseology and posture weren't just dissected by political analysts. They ignited a conversation about interruption, voice, and respect that reshaped the way people everywhere thought about power. Grassroots groups seized on the moment. Women's organizations and advocacy collectives incorporated the Let Her Speak narrative into campaigns aimed at breaking cycles of workplace silencing. Toolkits circulated that showed how to borrow Crockett's tactics, pointing out interruption calmly, reframing the moment, and turning would-be silencing into education. Social media bubbles buzzed with personal stories, teachers recalling faculty meetings where ideas were drowned out, business leaders recounting panels where their expertise was ignored, parents and students reflecting on moments their voices were overrun. The phrase Crockett method evolved quickly into shorthand for strategic defiance, being firm without losing composure. Civil rights activists embraced the new metaphor. For decades, groups like the NAACP and voter outreach orgs had worked to make the threat of suppression tangible. Now, with simple video proof, they could draw the line from TV tactics to the ballot box. If you felt what Crockett did, spoken over, redirected, cut off, then you already know how voter suppression feels. It's about who gets airtime, who sets the agenda, and who controls the outcome. Training manuals began including Crockett's moment as a scenario, teaching volunteers not just how to identify official barriers, but also how to confront everyday silencing from public forums to city council meetings. Educational spaces transformed as well. Professors and HR trainers referenced the viral exchange in seminars about negotiation, leadership, and gender dynamics. Law schools showed how patience and timing can turn power against itself. Business schools used the moment for case studies on executive presence. In elementary and high school classrooms, the hashtag #LetHerSpeak was used to launch anti-bullying campaigns and respect and debate weeks. Kids who felt overshadowed found a new hero, not for yelling the loudest, but for shining calmly under pressure and teaching audiences how to spot a power play. Even outside formal politics, Crockett's influence spread. Artists turned the moment into spoken-word performances and protest posters. Podcasters modeled entire episodes on how to reclaim voice when systems seem rigged. Activist networks ran workshops using the interview as a blueprint. Don't argue with the structure. Expose it. Let the audience see its flaw, then take your turn. Professional mentors encouraged young employees, especially women and people of color, to watch the segment for courage when facing workplace bulldozers. Corporate boardrooms and mainstream HR began to rethink their own policies after seeing how quickly public opinion could shift when power dynamics were laid bare. Some companies rolled out new guidelines on meeting equity, requiring facilitators to track and limit interruptions. Internal comms teams adopted the language of voice, equity, and narrative, citing Crockett not just as a political figure, but as a model for how to shift momentum without raising your volume. In the end, Crockett's moment did more than set a new bar for handling on-air bullies. It reframed the national conversation about whose silence is allowed and whose silence is enforced. The script flipped. Speaking up wasn't just about politics, but about claiming space in any room, for any reason, against any odds. And in that culture shift, a viral TV interview became the spark for a phenomenon that will keep echoing long after the cameras cut away. In the aftermath of a showdown meant to humiliate, something extraordinary happened. The usual power structure of televised debate buckled, and a new paradigm leapt into view. Jesse Waters, the undisputed king of Fox News interruptions, discovered, live and unfiltered, that even the most seasoned bully can be outmaneuvered by patience and preparation. On the other side, Jasmine Crockett, a congresswoman equipped with more courtroom discipline than cable news bravado, proved that sometimes the most effective way to reclaim a narrative is to let your opponent overplay their hand. Her strategy, a masterclass in restraint, timing, and ultimate reversal, didn't just defeat a host, it redefined the ground rules for public argument. The fallout echoed across every corner of American discourse. Waters' tactics, long tolerated as the cost of admission to primetime drama, were exposed for what they truly are: tools for silencing masking debate under the illusion of tough questions. But the real lesson landed far beyond Fox News. Crockett's response became a living metaphor for every space where voices are stifled, from the boardroom to the family dinner table. By calmly outlining her silencing and then flipping it back as a vivid demonstration, she turned an act of suppression into its own undoing. In this new age, viral moments travel faster than any spin. The immediate result? Young activists and seasoned leaders alike found in Crockett's approach a template for flipping even the most hostile situation. Classes studied her tactics. Trainers rewrote their handbooks to include her composure as a standard for executive presence. And millions of ordinary people, watching from their living rooms, recognized a piece of themselves in her refusal to be either cowed or baited into outrage. For Fox News, the consequences were both tangible and enduring: a dip in primetime ratings, advertiser anxiety, and a new reluctance among credible guests to walk into what's now seen as a losing game. Internal memos warned hosts and producers, the old model of domina. Ting through sheer volume might well be a liability now that the world is watching for every clipped voice and every repeated silencing. But for Jasmine Crockett, and by extension everyone who's ever been talked over, the ripple effect was transformative. Her fundraising exploded. Advocacy groups made her a symbol not merely of resistance, but of how to turn disadvantage into advantage without ever raising your voice. The Crockett method entered the lexicon, a shorthand for letting bullies set the trap, then calmly springing it on their own terms. The debate over voter rights, media bias, and democracy isn't settled by one viral moment, but the Crockett-Waters segment became something more, a living parable about the quiet strength it takes to turn interruption into inspiration and the importance of holding your space, even when every tactic is designed to squeeze you out. So as the clips keep circulating and culture catches up, the question is no longer who wins the argument in a rigged debate, but who owns the moment long after the cameras stop rolling. Is lasting power with those who shout loudest, or those who wait, then remind the world why a silenced voice is sometimes the one with the most to say? If you've ever wanted a blueprint for turning the tables in your own life, this was it. The rules aren't set in stone, and neither is the definition of victory. Tell us in the comments, have you ever flipped the script on someone who tried to silence you? What tactic worked? And don't forget to subscribe, because the next viral reversal might just be one line, one pause, or one perfectly timed thank you away from rewriting the game all over again.